Hi there, it's Cassie Trask. Welcome back for another scrapbookpal.com video. Today I'm going to be making a watercolor card. So let's talk about the products we're going to be using. I'm going to be using the Waffle Flower C Birthday stamps and dies. I just love this little whimsical stamp set, and I love how the dies are already cut apart for you. That's awesome. We're also going to be using the Under the Sea Sentiments. It pairs perfectly with that birthday stamp set. And then we're going to be using the Nuvo Watercolour Pencils in the color Dark Shadows. I love these. I ended up purchasing all the sets that Nuvo has, and these are just fabulous. So let's go ahead and get started with what we're making. I'm going to start with a piece of watercolor cardstock. This is a 140-pound watercolor cardstock. And I'm going to grab all the little images that I want to stamp out, and I'll put those onto that cardstock into my Mini Misty, and I'll close the door just to pick up all the stamps. And then I am going to use a watercolor proof pigment ink in order to stamp these out. There are lots available out there. You just want to make sure that the ink that you're using is waterproof if you're planning to put any water over the top of it. So I'm going to stamp that a couple times since this is a textured cardstock, and then we'll pull that out and we'll get ready to start watercoloring. There are several ways that you can use these Nuvo watercolor pencils, and I always like to make sure that I have out my swatch of all of the colors, as well as a rag for wiping off my brush. You could use a regular paintbrush if you wanted to, along with a cup of water, a cup of clean water, or you can use a watercolor brush that already has water in it. I am using a watercolor brush that has water in it, and what I did is I started by coloring the paper right with the pencil. This is one way that you can use these pencils. So after you've colored directly onto your watercolor paper, then you would take your watercolor brush and you could pull that color through into the center. If you noticed, I didn't color the entire image. I put down an amount of color where I wanted the darkest amount to be. My absolute favorite way to use these pencils is to take my water brush directly to the pigment that is on the pencil, and you can get, as you could tell, much deeper, darker color. So I like to just put it right on the pencil and then put the color where I want the darkest amount to be, and then drag that color down until I have it lightened up. And I'll just keep doing that for each of the parts. And what I have found is that when you want to sharpen your pencil, to get more of the pigment showing, you just wait until it's all dry, and then you can sharpen your pencil just like normal. But this is my absolute favorite way to color with these. Another way to use these pencils is to dip the pencil directly into water. That will activate the pigment that is in the pencil, and then you can just kind of color with it. I suggest that you play around on like some scratch paper and kind of see what works best for you. If you like the pencil lines, then the absolute best way to do it would be to just color directly onto your paper with your pencil, and then drag that color, like I said earlier, with your watercolor brush. If you don't like the pencil lines, then you might want to try something that I'm showing here. There are 5 different tins of the Nuvo watercolor pencils. This one that I'm using, as I mentioned, is called Dark Shadows. There is also a Hair and Skin Tones, a Brilliantly Vibrant, an Elementary Midtones, and a Pastel Highlights. And you can mix and match those, or I believe that Nuvo did an amazing job of putting the types of colors that would really go together in the same tin. So that's why I'm just sticking to this particular tin, Dark Shadows. I originally thought about going with brighter colors. Since this is an underwater scene, I thought that might be fun, but I thought the darker shadows, a little bit more regal colors would be a little bit of a change and a little bit more fun, in a sense that it's a little different. So as you've noticed, what I like to do is I kind of try to pick where my shadows and shading are going to be. In this case, the darker area is coming in from the left-hand side, so I am concentrating my color there. When I find that I have too much color on my brush, I will take my brush and wipe it on the microfiber cloth that I have on my desk, and then just move on from there. So here we're going to color the little turtle. I think all these little whimsical images are just adorable. As soon as I saw this set and I saw the platypus in there, I knew I had to do something with the platypus, but I also couldn't neglect that adorable sea turtle who has his little scuba mask on. I'm starting with a lighter green color. I'm going to just do a wash of that color on the parts of him. If you've noticed, I definitely do like to work in layers. Even if you're just using one color, you can absolutely work in layers when it comes to watercolor. And I think that's one of the reasons I like watercolor so much. I like to put down a wash of color, and then I will maybe put in some darker shadowing where I think it might be. And then when I'm done with this particular color, I am going to bring in a darker green shade that comes in this tin, and I will, use that all over the rest of the shell. But I'm also going to use it on the turtle, like his head and his little flippers, so you can add a lot of depth and dimension that way. And you don't have to wait for your piece to dry. Now, if you're using it as a pencil, just pencil directly to paper, it's better to let it dry. That way you don't etch the paper with your pencil, which is another reason why I like to just take my paintbrush right to the pigment itself. So here I'm just adding little touches of that color, and I'm going to shade that out, just blend it out a little bit. But it's so much fun. And then we'll bring in the purple for his little scuba mask. And then we'll bring in some other fun colors for our coral. No, that's not. Is it coral? See, I always screw these things up. Seaweed, possibly? Seaweed and coral. We'll just go ahead and say that. I'm a Midwest girl, so my limited knowledge of marine life just obviously is very much showing. So we'll just continue to paint these. We'll add some shadowing and shading in some of the areas, like I said, working in layers. And then we'll move on to like a pink color. But it was fun to definitely stick with just one tin, challenge myself to use one tin. Because there are 5 different tins and there are 12 pencils in each tin, that would make 60 colored pencils. And you could use them as colored pencils as well. That's another thought, just using them just like colored pencils without adding the water to them. But it's nice to have the option to add the color. All right, now I want to work on my card panel. So this is going to be my background. I am taking the pencil and I have it on its side, and I'm just very lightly adding sort of like a border of water on there. I don't want the full thing to be completely covered. We want this to look sort of organic, and so I'm going to bring in some water, but I'm going to, I put down that first wash of pencil, and then I'm going to once again go back to that technique of bringing my water brush right to the pencil, and we're just going to soften out those edges, keep adding color to the middle and bringing it out. And this just was so much fun. I'm even going to heat set it here so that it's nice and dry, and then I'm going to bring in a darker blue and see if I can get that just to kind of mix in there with that and blend it out even more. Just softening those edges so I don't have too many harsh lines, and then when I'm happy with that, we'll set that off to the side to dry. Next, I'll bring in the matching dies, and I'm going to tack those down with a little bit of washi tape, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And then we'll have all of our pieces ready to go. The card base is some more of that watercolor cardstock. So this is another 140-pound bit of cardstock that I had measured 11 inches by 8.5, or 11 inches by 4.25 inches, and then I scored it at 5.5 inches to make it a top folding A2 size card. And the reason I did watercolor paper is because I want to add that same sort of scene on the inside. And now I'm even just flicking that watercolor pencil all over just to add some splatter. I'm going to put my base inside of my Misty, and I'm going to grab out the sentiment that I want. Again, that comes from the Under the Sea Sentiments by Waffle Flower. When I'm happy with the sentiment that I've grabbed, I'm going to ink that up again with that pigment ink, so it's a nice crisp black ink, and I'll stamp that a couple times. Be careful not to put your finger over the top of that with the pigment ink because that may smudge, so let that dry, or you can even heat set that. And then I'll grab the panel that's going to be the front of our card, and I'm going to do the same thing with the sentiment there. And the nice thing about the Misty is that I can make sure that I'm lining that up correctly. There are some grid lines on the front of that door, so I can make sure that that sentiment is straight. My panel was cut down to 4 inches by 5.25, so it's a little bit smaller than an A2 size card. Stamp my sentiment a couple times, and then I'm even going to stamp some bubbles in there. I thought that might be fun. And then I'll kind of let that dry, and then I'm going to bring in a white gel pen just to color in those bubbles a little bit. so that blue doesn't stick through so much. And then we have to decorate the inside, so I'm going to glue down the little pieces that I colored. We've got our crabs, and then we're even going to put our little sea turtle in there. And then we'll close that up, and we're going to attach some 3D foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesive to the back side of our platypus. And then we're going to attach down our card panel to our card base. There will be a small white border around the whole card panel, which I think is kind of fun. And then we'll peel off our release paper from our platypus and stick him down right there in the water. And then we'll use our liquid glue to adhere down our coral and our seaweed. So there's just a little bit of dimension. It's a fairly simple card. The lengthiest process was just the coloring, and that's my favorite part. You could add some embellishments here if you wanted, maybe some little drops of glossy accents. I decided to keep it simple. And when we're done with that, that's actually going to finish off our card. I love how this one turned out. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for stopping by and leaving all of your love and support. We really appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.